Welcome to Living, Learning, and Leading with Purpose with me, Dr. Wajida Small. This channel is for those who want to live fulfilled lives, grow personally and professionally, and develop into influential and impactful leaders in their organizations, industries, and communities. Through my blog, podcast, and books, I share the best stories, lessons learned, and advice to help you live, learn, and lead with purpose. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Leading with Purpose podcast with me, your host, Dr. Wajida Small. I am so excited about today's episode because we have a very special guest. Her name is Kamilah O'Brien, and y'all, this woman is amazing, and she's out here helping everybody get their financial lives together, including me. So I want to tell you all a little about her before we get started. So to make sure I don't mess anything up, I'm going to pull up my notes. So here we go. Kamilah O'Brien is a personal financial strategist and the founder of Focused Spender, a personal finance YouTube channel. She is also an associate director with a national accounting firm focused on nonprofits and education-based organizations. Kamilah specializes in working with women who have succeeded professionally, i.e. me, but are struggling with money to create a strategic plan to reduce their debt, increase their savings, and leave a lasting legacy. Kamilah has a bachelor's degree in communications from Boston University and a master's in public administration specializing in general finance from New York University. Y'all, I am so excited for you to meet her, for her to drop some gems on how to get your financial life together. She's amazing, and I'm so glad to be able to welcome her to the podcast. So let's get started. So thank you, Kamilah, for joining me today. I read your bio in the introduction, but I would like for us to start off with you telling us your story.
Okay, well, thanks, Wajida, for having me on your show today. So just to give you a little bit about myself, I'm a native of New York City. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. My family is from the Caribbean, from Trinidad and Panama. And growing up, just thinking about money. So my money story, we should talk a little bit about my money story before I just jump in. But I went to college in Boston. I went to NYU after that, and I ended up with $65,000 worth of student loan debt. But growing up, it's not that we didn't talk about money. We talked about money in terms of money is to be saved, not invested or anything like that. So when I graduated with all this debt, I didn't really have a thing where I thought about, okay, let me focus on getting out of debt or let me focus on investing. It was more like, okay, let me just get a job, let me save my money, possibly buy a house. And that's about it. But, over the years, one of the things that happened in my life is that my sister bought me this book called The Total Money Makeover. And when I read it, I was like, you know what? I need to really think about how I'm using my money. I really need to pivot in terms of how I'm paying off this debt so that I can actually live a more fulfilling life. So that's what I did. It took 3 years. I paid off my student loan debt, and here I am now on YouTube, telling my story and trying to help women do the same thing.
Okay, now that's amazing. I have a couple of questions, right? So you talked about in your household, the money, it was more about kind of saving rather than investing. And I think that's true for a lot of households of color. And I think part of that is we generally aren't taught about just money and how to use money, or the right way to use money for our advantage. So you mentioned the Total Money Makeover. Now, was that the particular catalyst for you to change your mindset, or were you seeing some other things that made you say,
So I think that was the final straw. And that was the one that really took me over the edge. So I remember in college being at a meeting and someone came to talk to us and they started talking about IRAs, which are individual retirement accounts. And they said, oh, if you started at 18, investing $100 a month, then by the time you were, I don't know what age, 50 or 60, you would have $1 million. So at the time I was 21 and I thought, oh, I missed the boat. I can't believe I didn't start investing $100 then. I wish someone had told me. But then I also remember after college, before grad school, I read this book by Susie Orman called The Young, Broke, and Fabulous. And so she started talking about investing again. She mentioned IRAs. And I was like, I need to do something. So at the time, one of my friends, she worked for Primerica, and this is definitely not an advertisement for Primerica, but she worked for Primerica and she came to my house to give me a pitch to basically start investing using them and then also to become an agent, which I turned down. So when she said, oh, would you like to open up an IRA with us? I remembered that book that I read by Susie Orman and I was like, sure. So you have to just think about it like this. At that time, this is early 2000s, there were no such things. Apps didn't exist.
Yeah.
Smartphones didn't exist. So the only way to invest was basically through a broker. And so I said, okay, sure, I'm going to do this. And so that was like the first thing I did to like really get my money right. Another thing that I did when I wanted to move out of my grandmother's house and I wanted to get my first apartment, it was through a co-op in New York City, and you had to have like $5,000 before you could even get into the building because you had to put down like this, you had to basically buy into the co-op.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember sitting down and thinking, how in the world am I going to save $5,000? Because I gave myself this arbitrary deadline of 6 months to move. And so I sat down and I looked at like how I was spending. I sat down, tracked my money, and I realized that I was spending more money every single month than I was making. And so I came up with a plan for myself to save $5,000 in 6 months. Mind you, I was making about $24,000 a year before taxes. So I really wasn't making anything. And so I had to like really, really aggressively like reduce my expenses and then save so that I could get this $5,000, which I was able to do in the 6 months. And I just kept going for another year. So then I ended up with $13,000 off of my small salary. So fast forwarding to when I read The Total Money Makeover, I knew I had it in me. Like before I read the book, I just thought, okay, I'm just going to pay off these loans exactly the way the book is prescribed. I'm going to pay off these loans exactly the way my loan provider is telling me I need to pay it off. And I couldn't even fathom like really paying off more. Like every so often I would put an extra $50 or extra $100. But when I read the book, I was like, you know what? You really have to be aggressive. And you can do this because you've done this before. You've done something very similar before. So there's really no reason why you can't do this now. So all that to say, The Total Money Makeover was like that final straw in terms of me really getting my money life together.
Okay. 2 questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
You said that you were spending more money than you were making.
Yes.
Explain to us how that actually happens.
Okay, so I wasn't using. Well, did I have a credit card? No, I had a credit card when I graduated from college. Ran that up, paid it off. But I still had money in a savings account. So like all throughout college, I had money growing up in a savings account that I would like just use for my textbooks. So when I graduated, I still had maybe $1,000. Like I didn't have that much, but I still had something in it. And so when I first graduated from college, there was a recession. So this was in 2002. There was a recession. And so it was really hard for me to find a job. And so at the time I was just temping. And when I was temping, I really wasn't spending too much money because it's like a day work here, 3 days work there. So when I would get the money, I would just put it into my checking account. But then once I finally got a full-time job, then all of a sudden, I have money to spend. I didn't have that much money to spend, but every 2 weeks when I got paid, let me go buy a new shirt. Let me buy some new clothes. Let me buy breakfast and let me buy lunch. And so I was just doing all these things, but it didn't feel like I was living above my means because I still had like a little bit of a buffer in my checking account. It wasn't a huge buffer. Maybe the buffer was $1,000, but I had that buffer. So I wasn't really noticing that, you know, at the end of the month, that $1,000 starting point is now $950 or it's $900, that it was basically just going down every single month because I was just, you know, getting my paycheck and then spending it on whatever. Like I wasn't even into designer clothes. So it wasn't like I was like buying lavish things, but I was just spending. And I wasn't paying bills living at home. So it wasn't like I had that to hold me back. It was just literally me spending on whatever.
Now, you mentioned student loans, right? And recently, I want to say in the past couple of months, I'll say I supported a campaign with it's an organization called 1,000 Women Strong and the ACLU. And part of the campaign is to forgive student loan debt. And so in partnership with the ACLU, 1,000 Women Strong specifically focuses on advocating for Black women and identifying, you know, specifically how Black women hold the highest number or the highest amount of student loan debt. I am one of those women. I told my story specifically coming out of graduate school, getting my PhD. By the time I was done with all of my education, I came out with about $150,000 in student loan debt, which is still blows my mind. I have the idea that I owe anyone that amount of money is ridiculous. And you started to talk about you coming out of school with graduate school with student loan debt and how you tackled it. So I want you to, if you could explain that, but also what you meant by you did so differently than what your loan holder said you should, and that you were aggressive, and what that actually means.
Okay, so basically what that means is that when I started paying off my loans, I literally remember that first bill. So you know how you have that grace period? So I got a new job right when I graduated grad school, a much better salary than what I was making before. So of course I was on top of the world. Then I got that first bill and it was almost the same amount that I was paying for my apartment, which was, you know, this is years ago. So apartments were a lot less expensive than they are now. But basically, it was basically how much I was spending for my apartment. So I couldn't even fathom paying any more than what I owed, right? And so after I read the book, I realized that I needed to do a few things to have more money. So one of the things that I did not stop investing for my retirement, but I turned down the percentage. So maybe I was doing 5%, I switched it to 2% because I wanted to make sure I got the match from my company. Then I realized I just needed to make more money. So the first thing I had to do was look for, you know, additional income. And so I started doing things like basically temp jobs, but then I also started a tutoring job. So my job at the time was not strenuous or hectic. It was just a straight up 9 to 5. At 5 o'clock, I shut down. I never thought about work at home. Nobody was bringing computers home, so I didn't have to worry about that. So I was able to work an additional job. And that job, what I did, I tutored children. I was able to basically use that money to live off of. And then my paycheck I was using to pay for my student loans. And then also what I did, okay, so this is what I really had to do to really understand how to make this happen. Because if you're not strategic about this, it's gonna go by the wayside. So the first thing I did, I sat down and I just used like a money calculator. I think I probably used some formulas in Excel. And I said, okay, if I pay this amount, it's gonna take me 20 years to pay off all these student debts. If I add an extra $200, okay, it's gonna knock off 2 years. If I add an extra $400, it's gonna knock off however many years. So I realized I calculated basically how much I needed to spend or how much I needed to pay every single month to get it down to 5 years.
Mhm.
And then I looked at my budget and I was like, okay, is this realistic? Can I find this extra, $5,000, $7,000, whatever, every single month to pay off the student loans? And so I realized if I got some extra income, then I would have that extra money to then pay off the student loan debt. And so that's basically what I did. And so one thing I said is that when I sat down to make the plan, I gave myself 5 years, but then it took me 3 years. And it took me 3 years instead because I ended up switching jobs. I got not a promotion. I just left my job, got a better paying job, and then got some raises. And so whenever I would get raises, I wouldn't give that money to myself. I would just use that for my student loans.
That's a very good idea. And as I just think about it, and I think about like friends and family, it's the same thing with like, oh, I got an increase, and then it's kind of like, well, I get to spend more. Or
Yes.
they'll get a tax return. It's kind of like, oh, I have this extra money to just buy random things that really don't need, as opposed to looking at it as not necessarily additional money for you, but additional money that can pay off debt so that you're not in debt for the rest of your life.
Exactly. And when you brought up a tax return, so the one thing I would do, whenever I would get my tax return, because I was paying like student loan interest, my tax guy, he was amazing. So I was getting really large returns. And so what I would do, let's say if I got $3,000 back, I would take $500, keep it for myself to do whatever, and then the additional $2,500 that would go to the student loan.
I need to be smarter about my choices. No, but that's really good. And then you had mentioned investing, right? And the one thing, at least from my college experience, every workshop I ever went to was like, here, buy a credit card versus here, invest. And you talked about, at first thinking that you were too late. You kind of missed the mark because you were 20 and they said you should have started at 18. And I think a lot of people think that it's too late. And even though I started investing, I want to say I started investing in my late 20s, actually. Well, no, that's a lie. Early 20s, I had a job where they had a pension. My first job's out of college. They had a pension, and the pension was required, but they also offered, I believe it was a 401k, and that wasn't required. It was kind of like, if you wanted to participate, that's fine. I was 22, was like, I'm not going to do anything I don't have to do. And I didn't have to do anything to participate in the pension except for be vested, which I think it might have been like after like a year or two, maybe 3 years. And so I did that. And then I went to a new job. They also had a pension, but you had to contribute to your pension. And depending on how much you contribute, and you talked about this with one of your jobs, they would match it. And then they also had a 401k. And by that time, I was in my mid-20s and I started to learn more. So it was kind of like, I'll put a little tiny bit in the 401k and I'll put whatever I need to put in to match with the pension. And it wasn't anything significant because they didn't have a really significant match. And then I left that job. By then I was a little smarter. But by then I was in my mid 30s, and it was a much more higher paying job. And it's kind of like, you talk about like the max and contributions and all that stuff. I was kind of like, you know what, I can actually afford to max out now. So we have a 403B. So I max out. And the good thing about this employer is that not only do they give you a contribution, they just contribute to your 403B, they also do a match.
Okay.
So I could get up to 10%.
Oh, wow.
Up 10% up to the maximum an employer is allowed to contribute to those things according to like tax law and all that stuff. I don't know what it is. I just know they cap it. I say all of that to ask, or to tell more to ask if you could share your investment story and explain to us who, and I'm just not gonna lie, I know about this much about investing. I do now have a private investment account, but people are just like, what about an IRA and all these things? But talk about your kind of your story about investing and explain to us why it's not too late and what we can do to
jumpstart it.
Yeah.
So like I said, I had my first investment account in my early 20s with Primerica. And when I went to grad school, I stopped investing. So the reason why I ended up with $65,000 worth of debt out of grad school, and not a lot high. Actually, it was high. It was more like 70, but it could have been at least $90,000. The only reason why it wasn't that high is because I decided to work just about full time while going to school, just about full time. And so that way I basically was able to like pay the basics. So I basically cut everything out. So I stopped investing in grad school. And then when I graduated from grad school and I started working, before I started paying off my debt, I started actually looking at my investment statements from Primerica. And I realized that even though I hadn't been investing, I wasn't putting any new money into the account, and I stopped putting new money into the account for a couple of years, it was still growing a lot, like a lot. And I was like, you're paying me dividends? What are dividends? Like, why are you just paying me money and I haven't done anything? And that's when I realized, oh, no, you really need, like, you need to learn more about this, and you need to like do it, because your money is just going to keep making money without you doing that much. So after I got out of debt, this was like 2012. Before I got out of debt, I wasn't really, doing my individual retirement accounts. I was only doing the minimum in my 403b. And then once I paid off the debt, I think when I read when I read the Total Money Makeover, I think Dave Ramsey said something like, oh, you can do 15% of your income, or maybe he said 5. I don't even remember what percent he said, but it wasn't that high. And so I bumped it up to whatever percent that he had, and I still had all this extra money, and I was just doing randomness with it. And then one day I read this blog post, and the guy was talking about, he was showing how much he invested per month, and I think he was doing about $1,100 a month. And I was like, how can you afford to invest $1,100 a month? That's crazy. And then I started thinking about how much I was paying towards my student loan debt every single month. And I realized I was paying about $1,000 or more every single month to pay off my debt. And I said, well, okay, if you found that much money to pay off your debt, why can't you find that much money to invest? And that's when I was like, okay, I have to think about this completely differently. And that's when I opened up my IRA, which is, like I said, is the individual retirement account. I did the Roth, which is after tax. I increased my percentage at work in my 403b. And then I opened up, I think I just did those two things first. And then as I started getting more money from work, then I would start to like increase the 403b. That's when I opened up an account with Betterment, which is basically like a robo-advisor. You tell them all of your goals, and then they do the setting of the investment portfolio, so you don't have to do any thinking. Like, it literally does everything for you. And then, at the end of the year, when I sat back and I looked to see like how much my money grew, maybe it grew like 30%. The next year, I just kept doing that. It grew another 30%. And basically every year since I started in 2012, my investments grew by anywhere between 25 and 35% every single year. And I think about the fact that I didn't start investing seriously until I was about 32 years old. And now I'm 41. And so I hit 100,000 in my investment account, maybe in about 3 years. So it happened really fast. And like, they always say, like, there's all these quotes on the internet where they'll say, your first 100,000 is hard, but then after that it's nothing. Or your first million is hard, and then after that it's nothing. And I think that's what it is with investing. It's like, it seems hard at first, like it seems like, your money isn't growing, but it doesn't. Honestly, if you think you're too old to start now, you're just going to be older in 2 years wishing you started 2 years ago. So you might as well just start now. Just start. And it's like, even if you don't think like, you don't have to do $1,000 a month. You don't have to do $500 a month. Whatever you can afford to do, just start there. Then you'll probably realize that you probably can afford to do some more, and then just start increasing it until you're actually at that point where you're like, no, I cannot do anymore. But it doesn't matter how old you are, you can start. You can start. The money, as long as you don't invest today and like everything crashes and then it never recovers, which literally has never happened. Your money is gonna come back and it's gonna do much better for you if you are investing as opposed to just sitting on the sidelines.
Thank you for sharing that. And as I'm listening to you, and I think about just kind of my own experiences, and again, just my own points of reference are like family and friends, and like this fear of loss, if you will. And it really is kind of like I guess the value that's placed on cash in hand. Whereas at least when I think about investing, you don't see it. It's not necessarily tangible in that moment. But then you say like 30% year over year. I mean, if I'm not a numbers person, so I'm not going to even pretend to calculate anything in my head, but I think about myself, and I did one of those, I don't want to say random, but like investment apps. And I was afraid because when I left my job, I got a payout from like vacation. It was an amazing place because you just accrued vacation. It wasn't a use it or lose it. So I had a ton of vacation because I never took off work. And it was in that moment early. Actually, no, I was right about mid-30s when I had left that job. And I said, I'm going to invest all of this. And it was so painful because it was like I had so much money, like cash in hand, and like I had a deeper understanding of the value of it because I actually had it. And so it was just the scariest thought ever to just hand it over to this anyone.
Yeah.
Right. But my average, I think over the past, and it's been about 4 years or so, my total return in the 4 years has been like 200%.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was just kind of like, wait, what? I could have been doing this.
Yep, all
along.
Yeah.
And you talk about dividends, and it's kind of like, oh, your dividends. The first time I got like a dividend payout, I was just like, am I supposed to get this money? Exactly. I don't understand. You're giving me so. And the one thing that I've been doing is I've been reinvesting it. Which was also because when you think about kind of like the extra, and it's kind of like, I could use this money. But I think about, when you talked about strategy, and me, I'm thinking about kind of my own strategy. It's just kind of like, I'm going to leave that there because I can work with my cash in hand to pay off the debt, if you will. I'm going to let that grow. So when I decide to retire, I can retire debt free.
Yep.
I can retire early because I'm not trying to work for the rest of my life. Nope. And that's another thing people don't realize, like, this is your retirement.
Exactly. I feel like we're all going to be, 65, 70. And if memes are still a thing, it's going to be like memes of us at, 70, looking at ourselves at 30, like, why? That was more important than me right now?
Exactly.
Because people, like, you forget. I think, like, even when you said when you were 20 something and you were like, oh, I don't want to put any money in my 401k, it's like, but you're going to get it back, and it's going to be a lot more. It's not going to go away. You're
Yeah.
going to get it back. And I think people forget that. Like they don't think about that long game and what it's going to be like once they're older and they actually need that money.
I think the other part of it too, and again, just using my own experiences, I was never taught about that. When I think about my mom, she has a pension, but that was the thing.
Yeah.
You participate in a pension, you put whatever, but your job sets you up for retirement. It's not like that. It's like you need to set yourself up for retirement. Yeah. And even when you think about those that have like these really lucrative pensions, it's really not like you still need an investment account, right? Mm-hmm. And even if you had a pension, you're still dependent on Social Security, which probably will not exist by the time
I was gonna say,
like, I think you said 2034.
I think it's 20. What year is this?
I'm trying to think of your
either 2032 or it's either 2032 or 2030. No, it's 2034. And the funny thing is, I remember in grad school, my economics professor, she's like, it's going to be done by 2044. It's going to be done. And I remember at that point, like, I need to get my life together. And then for them to say, oh, no, forget that. We're taking 10 years off of that. It's
exactly
insane.
And I actually just got a Social Security statement, and it's just kind of like, why are you playing with my heart? Because I'm not getting any of this money.
Exactly.
You're telling me that I'm going to get by the time I'm 70. That's a lie. But when you think about that, right? And you think about people who, well, one, we're not taught. So I think it's very important for us to educate ourselves if nobody is educating us. And to some extent, for those of us that are educated, to kind of pay it forward and educate the next generation. Because if we don't know how to invest and save and know how to make our money work for us as opposed to working for money, it's going to, the next couple of generations are going to be real broke.
Really broke.
And so amazing. And I always tell my listeners that every time I have a conversation, I learn so much, and I have learned so much. So thank you for sharing that. Speaking of advice, what would you say is, I'll give you two. The two most important things that people should know about getting out of debt and investing and making their money work for them.
Okay, so I think in terms of getting out of debt, I think the most important thing you need to do is to really basically stop and assess how you are spending your money. Because I think a lot of times people think they can't afford to pay extra on their credit cards, or they can't afford to pay extra on their debt, but they're not actually taking stock into how they're spending their money. And so they're basically trying to find extra money after they spent everything they've spent for the month. And it's like, okay, well, I have $50, left over. So let me just put that towards the debt, as opposed to, stopping, really paying attention to how they're spending their money and really paying attention to their money habits so that they can build a budget that's going to allow them to reach the goals that they're trying to attain. Basically flipping everything where you're, prioritizing getting out of debt first, and then you're paying for or spending your money on everything else. And then in terms of investing, I would say, please don't be scared to invest. Just don't be scared. I feel like a lot of times, I was literally just having a conversation yesterday with someone, and they were talking about all of their anxiety they have around investing. So it's like, they'll put 4% in their 401k, and then maybe they'll knock it up to 5%. paycheck goes down by $20 or $40, and it's like, no, I need that money back. Is that $40 really what is that $40 gonna do for you? So it's like, stop being scared, stop staring at if you are an investor, stop staring at your investments, watching the market go up and down and going up and down. And the second it goes down, you're like, let me take all of my money out because this is not worth it. I'm gonna lose everything. You're not, you're not. Just as long as you're diversified, you'll likely be fine. So just start investing and don't be scared of the investments once you do it. So that's my 2 pieces of advice.
Thank you. Thank you. And of course, you give way more advice on your YouTube channel and the work that you do with your clients. So tell us about that.
So my YouTube channel is called Focused Spender, and that's focused with the ED. And that's where I basically, share all of my money tips, advice about investing. I show the different investment apps that I use. And I also like to make sure that I'm always using myself as a guinea pig. So if I'm telling you about an app like Betterment or M1 Finance, I'm also showing you exactly what I'm doing and the results that I'm getting so that you basically can get an idea of what you can do for yourself. So that's basically where I give you all of my money tips and all of my money advice. And I'm also on Instagram where I try and do the same thing with a little bit of my life sprinkled in at the same time.
Perfect. Thank you. So before we go, you did mention those 2 places. Is there any other place where folks can connect with you, find you, work with you? Give us your deets.
Yes. So if you go onto my Instagram page, there is a button that says either work with me or book now. So like if you wanted to have an investor helper call, I do that a lot. So 2 things that I do in terms of coaching, like one-on-one coaching, is I talk to people and I help them strategize their budget and getting out of debt. But what I realize is that a lot of people they want a place or a safe space to talk about their investments. And so I have an investor helper call where I will let you just ask all of your investment questions so that you can get started. I'm not giving advice. I'm not telling you what to invest in. It's more, let's set up this account. Let's make sure everything is structured. What questions do you have? And then we go forward from there. And then I also have a free guide. I don't know if you have a link that you can leave.
I do. So
okay.
all of Kamilah's details and the link to the free guide will be in the show notes.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kamilah, for joining me today. This was an amazing conversation.
Thank you.
I really need to get my life together. I'm working on it. I'm working on my money life, making it better, trying to be smarter. So thank you for the advice that you shared today, for sharing your story, because I think when we share our story, it inspires others to share theirs and look a little deeper. So thank you very much. And thank you all for joining us, and we will catch you next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. It has been great sharing this space with you. I hope that you have taken what you've needed so you can share what you've learned, and that you are on your way to living, learning, and leading with purpose. I encourage you to stay connected with me. Please remember to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. You can also follow us on Instagram at Leading with Purpose Podcast. And don't forget to visit my website, www.wajitasmall.com, where you can subscribe to my mailing list. Till next time.